Good afternoon, my fellow athletes and lovers of sports. Nice to see everyone today. In my freshman year of high school, I was set to play football. I thought for sure this is the sport that I was going to play. But at that point, my mother was very protective over me, and we were really close, and she didn't think it was a good idea because of all the injuries that could occur from playing the sport. Well, as the years went on, I grew further away from my mother, and by my junior year of high school, she was no longer really in my life. She moved on, and that's another story for another time, but it was just my older sister, my dad, and I. So I still wanted to play football during high school, but I was also really invested in band at the time, halfway through my high school career. And I couldn't do both. They conflicted schedules. They were both during the same time, so there's no way for me to do both. So I ultimately chose band. And around my junior year of high school, one of my friends asked me to play rugby, and I was like, okay, well that sounds like a lot of fun. It's pretty similar to football. So I thought I'd give it a shot, and I fell in love with the sport. And my mom could no longer tell me I couldn't do it because she was no longer in my life. And ultimately, I think that you could really get hurt in any sport, but as long as you treat the injury correctly and responsibly, no matter the injury, everything usually will be okay. Concussions and head injuries, I believe, in sports are not taken seriously enough. I think a lot of people don't see them as big of a problem as they really are, and that can cause a lot of the problems later on in life. So the first thing I think that should be done is concussions should be treated correctly. I think they should be given the right amount of time to rest and to get back on their feet before they play the sport again. Another thing is you should act quickly. As soon as the injury happens, precautions should be taken. We shouldn't wait a while until the injury is already much worse than it started. We also need to make sure that all athletes stop their physical activity and rest until approved by a doctor. Now, if we don't treat this serious injury, the head injury, these are some of the effects that can happen. I will now show you a quick video explaining kind of the effects of concussions and head injuries.
If you're an athlete, you've got a 5 to 10% chance of getting a concussion. If you play football, that likelihood jumps to 75%. But despite the high frequency of concussions that occur, many go unnoticed and untreated. Here's what happens to your body when you get a concussion. The brain sits in cerebrospinal fluid in your skull. The fluid can help to absorb small impacts, but a significant knock on the head or whiplash motion can cause your brain to hit back and forth on the walls of the skull. The impact of the brain sloshing around can strain and damage fragile brain tissue, and, in more serious cases, cause bruising and bleeding, referred to as contusions and hematomas. Of course, this damage may not always be apparent since it's not outwardly visible. And many people who experience concussions never lose consciousness or exhibit any other obvious signs of brain injury. But studies have shown that people who have already experienced one concussion are more at risk to receive a second or third concussion. Over time, these injuries can cause serious cognitive and emotional disability, and in some cases, death. So if you're ever feeling a little dizzy or out of sorts after an accident, make sure to take the time to recover and see a doctor right away.
That being said, some of the short-term effects are dizziness, loss of memory, uncoordination, not serious problems in the moment, but could affect in long-term effects, like permanent brain damage, and even possibly death. There have been many athletes, professional athletes, that have not taken concussions and head injuries seriously and have permanent brain damage because of that. A lot of professional football players die at a younger age because of their previous concussions. They keep getting them repeatedly, and once you have a concussion, it is a lot more likely to get another one once you have your first one. So that can really build up over time and become very dangerous. The last thing is it's a very common thing in sports, and people have to understand that you can't just play through them. No matter the situation, a lot of coaches might want you to play through the concussion because of the situation. Maybe it's the championship game and that's your best player, but you can't ignore how serious these injuries are. As soon as my previous point, keeping a concussion untreated can result in more serious injury and could even result in death and permanent brain damage. And I know previous players personally that have learning problems due to the amount of brain damage they have. So it's not a joke. And during my first season of high school, rugby in my junior year, we had our last practice the day before our first game, and I was so excited to play in my first game. I'd been going to team practices for several weeks at this point, and I felt like everything had been leading up to this moment. I could not wait to get out there on the field and show my team what I was there for. After warming up for a while and doing some stretches, running some laps, I was full of adrenaline and ready to start tackling. So we do tackling drills every practice. I lined up to start tackling, and there was the biggest dude on the team. He was about 6 feet tall, 300 pounds. I was confident but slightly worried, as one should be. I went to tackle him to the ground with proper technique. When we both landed, both of his knees came down on my head. I blacked out. Don't really remember anything after that except waking up and seeing all my teammates around me. But my coach said it wasn't a big deal and told me to brush it off and keep going. So he had me play in the game the next day, and I never saw a doctor, never saw any treatment, and I think that has affected me over time. Looking back on it, it was very irresponsible as a young high schooler, just listening to the coach and not really caring for myself. And I should have never continued to play, and I should have rested until the doctor said I was okay to go. So that's a big thing that you need to learn from this. So thank you all for coming and listening, and have a good day.